Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this afternoon's webinar. This afternoon, we're going to be going through eRequest top tips and features. And what I'll be addressing, I won't go through eRequest so much today, but I'll just be focusing for the next half hour on some tips. We'll go through tips specifically relating to users. We'll talk about things specifically relating to administrators and how they can get better functionality from the system. And at the end, we'll go through 3 of the new features that you may not know exist in the product, but have come out in the last couple of versions and in the latest version that we'll be putting out in a week or so. So, for those of you that might be new to eRequest, I just wanted to show you this slide. Those of you that have been on webinars before probably know this slide quite well, but it just positions where eRequest sits within the purchasing process in Dynamics. The first 4 boxes you'll see are within eRequest. So eRequest allows you to place a requisition on the system. It allows you to send that requisition through an approval hierarchy, and that hierarchy can be as many layers deep as you want to put it on. It also does commitment checking, so it checks against your Dynamics budgets to make sure that it's within budget. And then it creates a purchase order and allows you, or allows the users of eRequest to enter in receipts of those goods as they come in from the suppliers. So all that part of the system is done via a web browser. It can be done remotely by the users or from their desktops, but using a browser. No need to log into Dynamics GP. At the purchase order stage, when eRequest creates a purchase order, the purchase order is visible in eRequest, but actually it also lives within Dynamics GP. So it's the same data record, it's just the 2 systems can access it, and standard Dynamics purchase order processing can access the purchase order. The goods receipt, as I said before, can be put in through eRequest, but it can also be put in manually through Dynamics. And if you're using 3-way matching, that goods receipt can then be matched to the invoice within standard Dynamics GP purchase order processing. If you're doing 2-way matching, then the purchase invoice is just simply entered and matched against the purchase order, and you've got a 2-way match going on there. We move on from the purchase invoice, and the purchase invoice as part of the standard Dynamics process will move into payables, ready to be paid to the supplier. eRequest has an additional module here where you can optionally send that purchase invoice through a purchase invoice approval process, which it must go through before it can be proposed for payment and payment is made. So that just sort of positions where eRequest is, and today we'll be primarily focusing on tips and tricks and new features within the requisitioning approval purchase order goods receipt area. So there's 8 top tips here for users. So if you're a user of eRequest, not necessarily an administrator, but a user, you could be both, I guess. These are things that you might not know, but could come in handy in the way that you use the system on a daily basis. So one of the things with eRequest is that it's a multi-company system. So as you log into the system, it'll ask you which company are you logging into. Sometimes this can be a pain. The list of companies is shown in alphabetical order. So it could be that your company is not the company that automatically appears for you in the list of companies when you log in. So what we've done is within the login, what we call the URL, we're able to put in a function. So after you put in eRequest login.aspx, there's a question mark which defines that there's a function coming after this. COY, so company, equals, and then your company database name. So in this case here, we're logging into your server, eRequest login.aspx, in company FLTD, which is actually the UK company. If I was logging into Canada, I could have a separate URL, which is company FCAN, which would default the Canadian company in the companies list. So I can just go ahead and press login to get into the system. So if that's something that really bugs you every time you log in, you've got to change the company. Easy way around that to be able to manage that. But once you're into eRequest, eRequest shows you your default request form. And what I'll show you now is the way that we can default that as well. So if you're a user and you work in a number of departments, you have a number of different request forms, you can tell the system which request form you use most often and default that for you. Within a request form, I'll show you how we can default which group you get your approval from within the default group settings. And then also within each form, we can set default values for each field in eRequest. So if there's a field that has always got some text in it, or maybe your quantity is always 1, you can set a default for that within the system, and it will always come up with that. No need to enter it every single time. And then I'll go through and I'll talk about setting up templates and duplicating existing requests, which means that actually if you're buying something on a regular basis, you don't need to type anything. You can just duplicate an existing request and send that through for authorization. So let's go and have a look at those 4 items on the system. Show you how to do that. So I'll go across to my eRequest login. Now, I've only got one company here, so it's defaulting anyway to Fabricam, but it's within the URL that if I wanted to, I could put a question mark COY equals TWO, and it would default the company here. So I'm going to log in as Lucy. Bear in mind, you could also have Active Directory logins, which means you wouldn't even have to put your username and password here. And I'll click the login button. Okay. So with Lucy, when Lucy logs in, her default form is equipment and maintenance at the moment. Now, I know Lucy works in sales and marketing, so actually it's probably easier that it defaulted, if it defaulted to the events request form, rather than her having to change that every time to put on a request for some event that Nolan's is running. So within the user preferences up here on the top right, press user defaults, and it's up here saying default request form. I'll change that to events. So next time Lucy logs in, it'll default to that request form. Okay, Lucy has 2 approval hierarchies because in her role as sales and marketing, she reports to the sales and marketing manager. So she works in the sales marketing area. But Lucy also works in the office, and therefore some of the things that she needs to do is purchase some office equipment and some maintenance. And for that process, she reports to, or her requests go to the facilities manager. So within the events form, if I select events and double click on it, you can see up here we've got default group. So for events, the default group is going to be sales and marketing for Lucy. That means that it'll go to the sales and marketing manager for approval. If I double click on equipment and maintenance, you'll see it's the office maintenance group. And that means it'll go off to the facilities manager for approval. So by setting those defaults, when Lucy logs in now, if I just log out and log back in again, I didn't save it. There we go. Changes saved successfully. Just testing to see if you're all still awake. When Lucy logs in, it defaults to events. That's her normal thing. When she creates a request, it defaults the group to sales and marketing, and we'll go up the sales and marketing hierarchy. Okay, we spoke also about the ability to default items into fields. So there's an internal note here that comes up saying all receipts must be attached, ... If I go to the user preferences for an events type item, you'll see that what I've set is that in internal note for Lucy, use a constant value of all receipts must be attached, ... So if for the events module, we want Lucy to put an internal note of please check event date, that would be an internal note that every time Lucy created an events request, it would come up and default that detail there. When Lucy put in the event date, sent it to her manager for approval, it would say in the internal note that they should check for the event date. So Lucy doesn't have to remember to type it every time it's there. That also works if I show you on the defaults again. You'll see you've got user preferences for the header fields in eRequest. So all these fields can be filled in. A useful one here might be address code. If it's being delivered to a specific address for you, a specific address code, you can put it into there. If nothing's filled in, it'll go across to Dynamics to look for the defaults. It might be that you're doing particular types of events, particular types, names of events. You've also got the user preferences of line fields. So everything that you put on the line field down here can be defaulted using these options here. So it helps you fill in the request form easier. Okay. If I look at Lucid, so talking about templates and duplicating requests, within the drafts box, you can create templates of requests. So if you've got different types of requests, you could pre-populate the lines, but don't submit those requests for approval. What you're able to do then is you could go into a request. This is the one I just put on earlier, I haven't put any lines on yet, and press the duplicate button and use that request number 24 always as the template to be able to use. So that's sitting in your drafts box. However, we can go one further than that. We can take a look at the approved box, and we can see that there's a request here where Lucy has ordered some, has booked some accommodation at Bloomington and ordered some keyrings from Premier Prince Promotions for an event for last month. If she wants to duplicate that to run that event this month, all she needs to do is press the duplicate button, and we get now event number 25 with the same details in here. There's one caveat to that, in that quite often if you're using date required and fields like that, you might need to go and change those, because obviously the new request might be on a different date. So that's all right. Lucy can then submit that for approval. Okay, so ways of getting requests in easier without too much typing. Okay, I'm just going to also go through using the order, filter, search, and restrict features and lookups. The lookups in eRequest are very powerful, and they give us lots of features to be able to find the data you want. So we'll go and take a look at those. That might help you find data if you're looking for it. We'll also look at some of the history that we record against your requests. It might be interesting for you to go and have a look at to see how your requests are processing through the workflow or have been processed. And finally, there's a recall feature that people might not be aware of to enable you to recall your requests. So let's go back to Lucy. Here we go. And I'm going to close that and put on a new request, add a line, and have a look under the vendor lookup button. At the moment, it's showing me all the suppliers on my system because my suppliers are generally linked to what I'm buying in the item number. Because I haven't filled anything in here, it's showing me all the suppliers. Now, the way the lookups work, and all the lookups work the same, is that we've got an active header bar here. So as I click on vendor name, it'll sort all those suppliers by vendor name. If I click again, the arrow reverses and it puts it in descending order. And I can do that on every field. So that's ordering data in an order that's useful to you. If I've selected vendor name, we've now got the filter tab at the top here. So the A to Z, the 1 to 9 are filters. So if I know that my supplier begins with an M, I can click on M, and I'll just see the suppliers that begin with M here. So I've just filtered that very easily just with one click of the button. Okay, so I can take a look at the countries here, and actually if I wanted to search, if I had a number of these, I just wanted to search for my Canadian suppliers, I could use the search button at the top and say, show me where the country is equal to Canada, and you'll see it just restricts it by the 2. So I've got my 2 Canadian suppliers. So that's ordering or sorting, filtering and searching. You've also got the ability to add the suppliers to your favorites list. So I can click on Mitchell Transport, update my favorites, and then if I click on all and say show favorites only, you'll see I see Mitchell Transport. So you can selectively choose who your favorite suppliers are, and just by a tick of the button, get those favorite suppliers up on the screen. So, like I say, every lookup works the same. Some of them obviously more useful than others, but hopefully that helps you in searching for items, suppliers, accounts, those kinds of things on the system. All right. Using the order history, I'll just go to one of Lucy's older orders. So I'm going to have a look in the approved box. And right. So here I've got an order, again, some meeting rooms and some t-shirts. And it's quite strange because I'm sure Lucy, when she put it on, she only ordered 200 t-shirts. So if we're going to have a look at the history, we can see that Lucy put the request on and she sent it for approval. The request number 21 was sent for approval to Mark. You can see here actually, and if I click on the line, we can see that Mark yesterday at 12:07 changed the line promotional gifts. The quantity was changed from 200 to 250. At 12:08:30, he then approved that particular request. By clicking on the line, you can see more detail about it as well. So that I don't have budgets set onto these particular accounts, but that would be the budget summary at the time of approval. And also by clicking on the email up here, I can see the email that was actually sent to Mark asking him for approval. And I can check, yep, I did indeed ask for 200 t-shirts. So Mark has obviously decided he's going to get 50 more people to his event than what was first thought, so he needed to order another 50. So interesting things that you can see and glean from the history. Just finally then, on the recall feature, if I've got a request in my outbox, so here's one that Lucy has submitted to Mark for a meeting room. If Lucy thinks, oh dear, I should have added in some promotional gifts for this particular thing, before Mark has approved it, we've got a recall button at the top, and Lucy's able to go into recall that request. It tells you the request has been recalled, and you'll see it's event number 3. And if I go into the drafts box now, event number 3 is sitting here for Lucy to pick up and carry on working with. So if you've submitted something for approval and you've forgotten something, or maybe you just want to recall it and send it to somebody else, you can do that through the recall button. Some quick top administrator tips. Some of these you may know, some might be new. So within the management studio of eRequest, we've got the ability to clone users and clone request forms. So once you've created one, you can clone that record to make others. If a user leaves, you've got a mass assign feature, mass reassign feature, which allows you to reassign all that person's requests to another user on the system. And as an administrator, you can also take control of requests. So we're just going to quickly look at that within the management studio. So here's the management studio here. Administrators will probably be familiar with this bit of software. So if I click on Lucy, I've got Lucy's record here. And if I right-click on her, it gives me the option to clone Lucy. If I press the clone button, it asks me what's the new login, what's the new username, email address, and password. And then it asks me, do I want to copy her group memberships? So is she in the same eRequest groups? Copy request form access. Does the new person use the same forms as Lucy? Copy company user access. Are they in the same company? And copy the user preferences. So those user preferences that we set up earlier for the defaulting, etc., do we copy those as well? You can tick all those boxes, hit OK, and it clones that user across in the system. So a much easier way than having to enter all the details over and over again. We've extended that thought then into the request forms. So if I click on events, so here's a request form I've set up, it's all perfect, I'm all really happy with it, I can right click on that and clone request form. And here it's asking me what company and what name do I want to give to that request form. So we use this quite often by setting up request forms in a test environment, and then when we go live, we copy it across into the live company without having to redo all that setup. Caveat on that one is the copy doesn't copy across approval values so on the system. So you'd have to set that up for each individual form separately. That was an audit requirement, and that they didn't want feedback from users, was that you shouldn't be able to clone a form and then the users have the same approval authorities and rights within that new form that should be entered again. So that's the cloning users and forms. You would have seen when I clicked on Lucy, right-clicked on Lucy, there was the reassign requests option. So if Lucy is taking a couple of weeks off and we need to reassign her request to somebody else, we click on the reassign, and I can see that she's actually got 2 requests at the moment. Request form equipment and maintenance, 5 on employee expenses, 11 on equipment and maintenance within the sales marketing group, and 24 on events. So I can select from a list of other users who I want to give those requests to process through the system. What it does is it changes the current user or the originating user for those requests. Lucy can't be deleted from the system until all the number of requests here is 0. So should the user you're working with have left the company, you could reassign them, get it down to 0, and then remove that user from the system. Okay, and finally, just to show you as an administrator how you can take control of requests, I go back to my eRequest and I log in as myself. I can go to the equipment and maintenance window, and I can take a look at requests that are on the system because I've got administrator access to be able to view them. So I can have a look at a request here that was put on by Lucy and submitted to Catherine. I can double click on that, and if Lucy or Catherine need help on this, or I need to, I can take ownership of this request. You'll see that at the moment it's originated by Lucy, assigned to Catherine. When I take ownership, it says it's assigned to me. Therefore, it's open for me to amend or look at. But it's also at the top here, it knows that it's just in admin mode. Of course, everything I do to it is stored in the history, as I showed you before. Once I've finished doing something, or maybe I want to return ownership, I can press the return ownership button, and I can return it either to the originating user that it came from, or I can return it back to another user in that same hierarchy group. So if Catherine was away, for example, I could take ownership of it and return it to another user in that group. Okay. So our time is running short, so there's just want to go very quickly and show you some of the new features. So the import feature is probably the newest item. This will be coming out in the release in the next couple of days. We have the ability here to import templates. And I've created a template which I've called Ceridian in this case. Anybody that uses Integration Manager will be familiar with the terminology here. So we've got a source file. We can have a source file for the headers, a source file for the lines, and we can create relationships between the source files. It could also actually be just one file with different views of that file. So you create your source file, which typically would be a CSV file coming in. You relate them together, and then you go through the field mappings. And inside the field mappings, there's all the fields available inside eRequest. And I can select on a field, and I can say this field maps to a field on the Ceridian table, field, I don't know, that's tax amount, but never mind. We'll just put the tax. I could also link it to a constant value of 10 if I wanted to, or I could link it to a function, and within the function, I can use scripting to create logic that I might need within that particular process. So a nice flexible tool to allow you to import requests into eRequest now. You'll see also there's the ability to export templates and import templates from other systems. Okay, so just finally then on the products, we've added in a new feature for prepayments. So if we take a look at creating a new request for equipment and maintenance, if I put a new request on, where'd it go? If I put a new request on now, there's an option down here to say, is this a prepayment purchase? and how many periods is it a prepayment for. So if it was, say, some service that I was getting today that would be delivered to me over the next 12 months, but I had to pay for it in this month, I'd put on the value, I'd put on the start date, prepayment, yes, number of periods, 12. What the system would do then automatically once you put the invoice on is it would post the value to a prepayments account on your balance sheet and would extract 1/12 of it out every month into the actual account number that you'd put up here, into the expense account. So right from the beginning, from eRequest, you can specify the prepayments and how this particular invoice must be, or this particular purchase must be accounted for within the system. The last new feature I just wanted to quickly point out at the bottom here is a new type of user-defined field. So you know that you've got text fields, date fields, and numeric fields, and drop-down lists within your user-defines. We've added a new category whereby I can specify a data, maybe out of Great Plains or out of other systems, where if I press the lookup button, it goes across, in this case, to my customer master inside Great Plains, and it brings me back a filtered list of customers and customer names, and I can say, actually, it's Greenway Foods who I'm purchasing this supply for because they're the outsourced customer on this supply. So a nice, easy way of being able to link your dynamics data or any other data into your requests with eRequest. Okay. So I hope some of those tips and tricks have been useful, and that some of those new features look good to you, and you're able to see how eRequest is evolving as a product as we add more functionality into it. As always, I always say this: if you've got any thoughts, any questions, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer them. And also, as eRequest on a quarterly basis, we look at any suggestions from customers to add into the product. Please feel free to let us know the kinds of things that might help you in your procurement process. So thanks for your time this afternoon, and I'll just watch the session for a little while, watching if there's any questions. Otherwise, please let us know. Email the office, and they'll be able to answer them. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.